In this episode, we speak with John Thompson, the Senior Vice President and Principal of the GenAI program and AI products at the Hackett Group. John leads the firm's GenAI Executive Advisory Program and guides the development of AI software across industries. He brings over 38 years of expertise spanning all aspects of advanced analytics and information management, including descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, AI, cognitive computing, and big data. John was recognized as one of the top 25 artificial intelligence consultants and leaders of 2024. The Hackett Group is an IP and platform-based GenAI strategic consulting and executive advisory firm. Using its AI XPLR and ZBrain platforms, the company's experienced professionals help organizations realize the power of GenAI and achieve quantifiable breakthrough results. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the Executive Chairman of Market Insight Media and Managing Partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Top Consultant, a podcast featuring today's best consultants who advise and provide services to corporations, governments, nonprofits, and other organizations. Executives and key decision makers tune in to Top Consultant to identify the most knowledgeable and experienced consultants for their most important projects.
John, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
RJ, thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
As I was reading through your background and the amount of kind of area you've covered within the field of artificial intelligence, I was almost left not knowing where to begin. You know, for many in our audience, we've been hearing about artificial intelligence for the past few years, most prevalently. And, you know, AI has such a wide-reaching span of areas that it could touch. For the benefit of our audience, can you take us to the various, how you would break down AI in the way you look at it, in the way you maybe compartmentalize it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And thank you for that setup and context. You know, AI has been around for at least 70 years. When I say I've been involved for 38 years, most people say it hasn't been around that long because a lot of people think AI started with GenAI 3 years ago. And that's fine. That's cool. Not everybody is an AI nerd like I am and living it and being part of it. The way I think of it is that the first 70 years of AI that we're up to now has been all about predictive information, predictive analytics, predicting how many people are going to show up at the store, predicting what the best price is for people to buy, you know, predicting those kind of things. And that's all been structured information. And that's been really valuable and useful. And then I guess about 5 years ago, causal AI started coming into at least the tech circles. Predictive AI is all based on correlations, but now we have a tool for causal AI. So we actually know A caused B or A more than likely caused B. And then when causal AI was just taking off, then Gen AI exploded onto the scene and took over, you know, the conversation. So for the last 3 years, we've all been talking about generative AI. So the way I think about it is that we have predictive AI, we have causal AI, and we have generative AI.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the scope of consulting firms, which, you know, frequently work with some of the largest corporations, where's the most acute need for AI so that corporations don't feel like they're missing out on cost savings or they're missing out on revenue generation?
Most of the conversation in the last 3 years is all centered around generative AI. You know, the explosion of Chat GPT and the growth of the large language models and all the different things that we see out there. Most of the conversations have been around generative AI, and it rightfully so. You know, generative AI is an impressive technology. If you're really looking for personal productivity or cost savings or activating unstructured information, that's where you're going to be. That's where you're going to be around generative AI. And that's where most of consulting firms are spending their time helping their clients. I know that's where I spend 99% of my day.
Mm-hmm. You had a leadership position at EY and you're now at the Hackett Group, and you did some big things at E&Y. Can you share with us a little bit of those kind of key milestones that you crossed while at EY, employing a big kind of workforce focused on AI?
Absolutely. EY is a great company, and The leadership that was there that hired me was really switched on about AI and ready to do things with it. And it was a great time to be part of the organization. They gave us freedom to build something called EYQ. If you're on LinkedIn, you see EY is talking about EYQ pretty consistently and widely around the world, and they should. At the time, it was a groundbreaking implementation of generative AI. 300,000 employees using the system on a daily basis. It's been up now for 2.5, almost 3 years at this point. I was talking to some of my old colleagues last week, and they said it is just past 500,000,000,000 tokens consumed. And that's a massive amount. So we built the substrate, the foundation, the models, the environments, the governing environments, all that kind of stuff. And now when I left, we were building applications on top of that, something called Deal and Delivery Assist to help with proposal generation, something in HR around tax, if you're an expat moving from one location to another, and many other applications. So I enjoyed my time at EY, and we built some groundbreaking technology there, which was quite fun.
And was it for internal use or was it for extending services or tech solutions to clients?
I'm predominantly a software person. I've been working for 38 years now, and probably 35 of that has been in the software industry. So when I came over to EY and they said, we'd like you to build these things, I immediately said, well, if we're going to build this for internal use, we should build it for dual purpose use. So we built it. I think the management wanted for internal use. We built it for dual purpose. So it not only runs EY's AI applications and infrastructure, it has been repurposed, rebadged, reskinned, and sold to external clients as well. So there's no reason why organizations can't build these things for dual purpose.
Excellent. And now at Hackett Group, what's your main focus there?
My main focus is standing up a Gen AI services practice. That's number one. And number two, Hackett bought a company called Leeway Hers that has a product called ZBrain. And then Hackett has built a product called AI XPLR. So in addition to standing up the AI practice, I'm also helping build those intellectual property assets as well.
hmm And to what extent do you work on sector specific AI? Take, for example, one of the largest sectors, healthcare. Would you be able to kind of maybe share some insights related to AI and healthcare?
I work across all industries. I'm not sector specific. It's one of those things that I'm sure I will get more sector specific as time goes on. The last 2.5, 3 years has all been about trying to understand Gen AI and stand up platforms and environments and foundations and things like that. I just recently had a conversation with a company, a large medical oriented healthcare company here in the United States. They described to me their journey through Gen AI, which made me smile because it mirrored exactly what I had done at EY. It was exactly the same thing. So now what they're doing is they're building applications for their internal operations to be more efficient. Interestingly enough, they're focused on mostly on HR, helping screen resumes, accelerate the talent acquisition process, get offers out to people more effectively and efficiently. One interesting application that I've seen that this healthcare company was doing was they're using Gen AI to generate personnel reviews, performance reviews.
hmm
Now, I've struggled with this personally is that, if you have a high performing employee and you're trying to remember what they've done for 12 months, many of the reviews have bias. You remember what they did in the last 3 months. The last quarter is very clear, but the 3 quarters that were out, sometimes that's a little bit more fuzzy in your mind. But you can use Gen AI to go back and look through all the correspondence you had between each other, look at all their project plans, look at their engagements, and then actually use Gen AI to write the first draft of the performance review that incorporates the entire year's worth of contribution rather than any bias brought by a manager that is not as good as remembering the entire year. And I aim that criticism at myself.
Now, you've written a whole series of books related to analytics and artificial intelligence. Maybe we could cover a little bit of that. I'd be
Sure.
curious to hear about maybe the latest one. I think it's
Mhm.
called The Path to Gen AI.
Absolutely. The latest book is called The Path to AGI. And I was hearing a lot of conversations in the market from people talking about AGI is here. In artificial general intelligence, the idea is that when AI becomes as smart as a pretty smart undergraduate, a really good personal assistant or something like that, And I just really thought that people were missing the mark in their comments and their dialogue. And I thought the market in general was getting the wrong impression. Some people are saying AGI is here, AGI will be here next year, in 2 years, 5 years. My view on it is that it's not going to be here for another 120 years. So I think it's a long way off. And people go, oh, well, why do you think that? And I said, well, how many times has Siri gotten you to the right Starbucks? Not very often. It directs you in the wrong ways and does all sorts of silly things. But I am an AI optimist. I do believe we will get to AGI at some point in the future, but I'm also a pragmatist. So really the book takes you through predictive AI, generative AI, causal AI, and then talks about where we're going in the next 20 to 30 years, which is composite AI. Then once we have composite AI, we can start the journey to artificial general intelligence. I believe we will get there, but I also believe there's a significant amount of work we need to do technologically, information architecture wise, culture wise, governance, and many other areas that are related to that. So we'll get there. It's just a lot of work to be done.
No, it's fantastic. I was speaking with a CTO of a company and he was commenting on how in many cases AI is hyped up. And he said, I'd be interested to hear an AI expert talk about debunking AI, which is what you're hitting on. It's like we're still 100 years off from where this is going to be true AGI. I think folks are maybe what makes them anxious maybe is that they're missing out on something, that AI is already becoming used and I don't know how to use it the way everyone else is using it. Is there maybe something you could highlight about how people should be thinking about using AI currently? What should they be learning now?
Yeah, that's a great question, RJ. I really like that. And I do see a lot of anxiety and angst in the marketplace in that area. People saying, oh, they're ahead of us. And, the leaders are ahead of people, and that's why they're leaders. That's just the way statistics works. Some people will be leaders, some people will be in the middle of the road, some people will be laggards. So if you really want to understand Gen AI, start with your prompting. There's a lot of conversation about prompt engineering. I'm encouraging people to drop the word engineering because that's, it's not really engineering. It's prompting is what it is. And people say, oh, well, hey, I just write what I like and send it in. And sure, you can do that, but that's not structured thinking. And it's not like you have to be structured as if, it has to be perfectly done this way, but you need to think through what you want the model to do. Because what you're doing is you're using your natural language, whether it's French or English or Dene or Hindi or whatever it is, to stimulate a model, to stimulate a program. So if you send in sloppy thinking, you'll get sloppy results. Just like we used to say in programming, garbage in, garbage out, same kind of thing. So in your thinking about how to use Gen AI, be more structured, be more prescriptive what you want the model to do. If you want the model to run over this scenario that you're giving it 30 times, say so. I want you to consider this in 30 different ways before you give me an answer. Or think about this carefully and explain your reasoning to me step by step. Or maybe you're cost conscious. People don't really understand that when you send in your prompt, it's getting parsed into these tokens, and then it's running through the model, and then the tokens are coming out and being recombined into your completion or answer. Your input token, let's just use round numbers, costs you a penny. Your output tokens cost you a dime. So the less structured you are on the way in, the more expensive it is on the way out. And you could say things to the model like, I only want you to consider this or run this through a reasoning process or an inference process until you burn $3 of compute time. Easily done. So today, what people need to do is start thinking more structured in how they're stimulating these models.
And when we talk about prompting or the models, are you referring to like a Chat GPT, Gemini? How would you maybe talk about the various models? Like if you're training on a particular one, or does it matter? Like if you're prompting on Chat GPT, if you use a comparable platform, are the prompts the same or are they different? Should you learn on one versus the other?
From that perspective, RJ, and that's a great question, is they're all the same. From a large language model perspective, GPT-4o and Mistral 7B and Cohere and, all these models pretty much are the same at the high level. Now, Anthropic and Cohere and OpenAI would all say different things. Our models are better than their models, and models are proliferating at this point. So, you could take your prompt, and many people at EY did this or do this in EYQ because we had many models behind EYQ. So you can send one model to GPT 3.5 or send one prompt to GPT 3.5, send the same prompt to 4, send the same prompt to, a Cohere model, and the answers will come back and they will vary because large language models are neural network based and they're probabilistic. So even if you take the same prompt and run it into the same model at 9 o'clock and 9:01 and 9:02 and 9:10, you could get variations in the answers because the model is probabilistic. Depending on where the weights are at the time and when the prompt ran into the model, it's going to vary. So you are definitely going to see variations within a model in different responses. You're going to see variations across models, and that's to be expected.
And do the models vary in terms of the recency of the data that it's pulling from?
Yes. Well, you mentioned something earlier in one of your comments about training. We as users are not training a model. The model has been trained, it's been locked, it's put out into production. We're running it in what we refer to as scoring mode. It's basically scoring your prompt and giving you a response back. Now, each model is trained on a different time window of information, the breadth and the depth of the internet. That's why you hear about different models. They say, okay, well, this model's training data set ended in 2018 or 2019 or 2021. If you ask about the recent US presidential election and the model was trained before that, it won't know because it just doesn't know. Models only know what they're trained on. But you can easily fix that. The context windows in these models are huge. Yeah, we're talking some or a million plus characters. So you can ingest all sorts of contextual information into a model and it will be there. The model won't be trained on it, but it will have that information available to it. Let's say that you're interested in understanding the personnel policies of the company that you work for, and they just updated a bunch of them in the last week. Okay, well, it's easy to ingest all those HR policies into the context window. And when you ask questions of the model, it'll go to the information in the context window and generally won't go to the model itself because it knows. It's like, oh, okay, you're asking me something that is later in the timeline than my training information, but you've ingested it in the context window and that's where I'll go get it. So the models are fairly intelligent about where they source their information to give you the most accurate response.
Now, if one is just wanting to use the model without feeding it information, Gemini, given it's like hosted within Google, is that drawing from the most recent, whatever data is available through Google, which is reaching into the internet real time, that would always provide you the most accurate, up to date information, whereas ChatGPT may have a certain cutoff.
Yeah, Gemini's models have the same cutoff, not the same date, but they have the same limitations as OpenAI models. All models do. They're all trained on a certain time window. Now, environments and models like those from Perplexity are augmented by real-time search. So, you may use a Gemini model in Vertex that doesn't have search enabled, and you'll get the information from the training window. You may use a model in Vertex, a Gemini model that has search enabled, and you'll get from the model and you'll get from search as well. So you have to be aware of what environment you're actually using. Is it search enabled? Is it not search enabled? Is it augmented and wrapped with a wrapper of information that's more relevant to things you're interested in? You just need to be aware of what the back end of your system looks like.
So I guess there's a difference to my question earlier about what should we be thinking about now or learning about AI now. And it's dependent on what role you're actually in, like a CEO role versus, middle management versus on the ground analyst level. Let's talk to like maybe C-level and up. What should C-level folks be paying attention to with regards to AI and how it can impact their ability as leaders or how they think strategically about their own business lines?
The C-level CEOs, COOs, I see some reticence in those roles at this point. I recently read about an offering where a company would train a CEO model that they purport will run the company better than your human CEO. I don't think that's really true, but that it's out there anyway. And then we have boards of directors that are all AI models too, and things like that. That's all fun and games, and hopefully no one's induced too much anxiety in people by saying that. But the C-suite, they should be looking at these models and prompting them and asking strategic questions. What is my competitor doing? What is the global macroeconomic environment? What is the current U.S. administration going to be doing around macroeconomic policy? What's the impact of the chaos in the tariff discussions? Those are great questions to ask a large language model. And you can get those answers back and you can decide, do I believe that or not? I do also teach at the University of Michigan, and one of the classes that I'm going to be building very soon is the role of critical thinking in the age of AI. I'm very privileged. I talk to people who are 17. Some of my undergraduate students are 17 years old, and I talk to boards of directors, and some of those people are in their 80s. So I see this span, across the world and how people are reacting to these models and this information. And across all those age groups, one of the things I see missing is people looking at this with a critical view. Is this really information I can trust and believe? Yes, models are great, and they are trained on a huge amount of information, but they do hallucinate. So, sometimes the information coming out of the model isn't just not right. So you can't really trust it. But we have been doing a lot of work over the last 3 years on relevancy and accuracy and reducing hallucinations. But to get back and close out on your question, I think CEOs, COOs, and C-level executives should be querying models about strategic and macro level effects.
Excellent. We're coming up on time. I do have two final questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Wow, that's a great question. I never expected to go to college. I was an auto mechanic. I left high school and I was working in a Ford dealership, and I never, ever thought of college. And the guy that worked next to me had one son that went to college and one that didn't. And he talked to me over a span of about 9 months and convinced me that I could be more than an auto mechanic. No shade to auto mechanics, none at all. And his name was Rick Partlow. He made a huge difference in my life.
Amazing. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity cause or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
The Mark Cuban Foundation. Mark's foundation supports AI boot camps in 40 cities across the United States. I've been involved for 5 years. I helped establish camps in Philadelphia, Pontiac, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit. I funded a camp in LA with Will.i.am and support a camp here in Chicago. And I'm currently talking to people about creating more camps. The idea of the AI boot camps is to invite in underserved high school students across the United States and teach them about AI over the span of 3 Saturdays.
Wonderful. Well, John, that's a great note to end on. Thank you again for taking the time. I've enjoyed this conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, RJ. Have a great day.